Welcome to another episode of Unleashing the Future of Work Live, a guide podcast. Today is a special episode in partnership with our amazing partner, Humanly.io. Make sure to check them out. And we're talking about using your platform to create change. And I have a rock star lineup for you all today with fantastic leaders who are doing just that in their community and within their organizations. Today, I am joined by the CEO and founder of Humanly.io, Prem Kumar. I'm also joined by Jesse Tinsley, the CEO and founder of JobMobz, an advisor, as well as angel investor. I'm joined by the chief boss lady herself of Armoire. Armoire, yes, it's fancy, right? Miss Ambika Singh, as well as Miss Lisa Brummel, who is the owner of the Seattle Storm, as well as former VP of HR at Microsoft. And I'm really excited to dig in with them on what they're doing in their respective communities and within their respective organizations to truly create change and address a lot of the things and issues that we're facing right now when it comes to systematic income inequality, racism, and just the things that are going on in the world. So I'm really excited to talk to them a little bit about their backgrounds and what they're doing in their respective communities. And believe it or not, many of these people are in Seattle. So if you're tuning in from Seattle, please show us love. Definitely show us love. And if you're tuning in from the Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, show love as well. With that said, let me bring on today's phenomenal guest. Hey, you all.
Hey,
Tim.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having all of us.
Thank you for joining. So, I want to check in with you all. Like, how are you all doing given the state of the world right now?
There's a lot going on. It's exciting to bring together this group here of Humanly advisors and customers and partner with Guide on actions we can take. Been doing a lot of listening recently and trying to take action as well. But yeah, it's a tough time, man, in a lot of ways. Yeah, Lisa.
I would completely agree. It's a super tough time. It's a tough time for just human beings in the world. Some people who are directly affected by issues that are going on, some people who are allies to people who are directly affected. Then add a pandemic that we have no control over on top of that. And it's nice that we're all here. I'm happy to see all your faces. I'm happy to see when you smile. Makes me feel good. And I need those things these days.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Ambika?
I mean, I would echo a lot of that. I think I feel very much alive, and that I'm super grateful for because I think we've all been made aware of how much interconnectedness we have, for better or for worse. And I think this group, I'm really excited to learn more about what we can do to help starting at home, our communities, our teams, things like that. So it's been a real time, but we're here for it.
What about you, Jesse? What are you thinking, man? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. Obviously, there's so much going on in the world, and I think there's a big opportunity to really impact across your organizations and everyone else. Sorry, I'm echoing here. Not sure if it's somebody else's mic, but nonetheless, yeah, I think there's a really big opportunity to impact society and your organizations and have real change. So I think that's exciting.
So, I want to start with you, Lisa, right? Because you made many lists of influential people in the tech world and beyond, and was once referred to as the third most important and influential person at Microsoft, right? So you've done a lot to use your platform to create change. I want you to talk a little bit about, does this come naturally for you in the work that you've done?
Well, yes and no. So go all the way back to my time as an athlete back in college. And I think when you're in sports for a lot of your life, leadership just kind of happens and teamwork happens. And that's just kind of what you do every day. And I loved doing that. And when I came to Microsoft way back when in 1989, and was actually hired by Ambika's father. So
Wow.
we're all generationally getting connected here. Yes, he was my very first manager at Microsoft. It was a spirit of individual empowerment. It was a spirit of say what's on your mind. It was a spirit of get to the best ideas. It was a spirit of we have to do right in the world. PC on every desk and in every home. Like, it was big vision stuff and people who believed in it. And I'm not sure I could have ever started, like, it was amazing to be able to start with, like, say what's on your mind, expect to change the world, don't waste any time, work with other people, go. So it was, that's how it started. And that level of empowerment, when I had kind of my first big foray into business, that's just what was expected. And so you match sort of being an athlete and that starting place. And then you have the benefit of how Microsoft grew over the 25 years I was there. And it was partly what I wanted to do, but it was also partly what was expected of me. And being a leader in the company was what was expected. And, following that and purchasing the Seattle Storm was another one of those things where, like, who plans for that?
Yeah.
It's like, I've been at Microsoft for 20 years. Maybe I'll just buy a basketball team. Well, that just doesn't work that way. But when you see something in your community and you see an asset that people care a lot about that has impact on what happens here, and it might go away, I don't know. I think it's just that leadership thing where a couple of us got together, a couple of women got together and said, this shouldn't happen. We need to change it. Yeah. And so none of us had experience running a team. None of us knew Clay Bennett. None of us knew anything about what we were doing, but we just thought we should go try this. And I'm going to bridge that pretty quickly to the team's role in the community and the team's role in social justice. So we are a women-owned team. We are a team of women who play out on the court. Yeah. We are a diverse group of people, and certainly the team makeup is different than the traditional Seattle makeup. We have a lot more African-American players than probably would be represented in the population in Seattle. And they have a voice, and they want to have a voice. And one of the things we agreed to when we took on the team was we will, as an organization, use our platform to have a voice in the community. It will partly be what we care about as owners, but it's also partly what our team cares about and what they want to say in the community. And I'll go back one more time and then leave it to everybody else. At Microsoft, the whole idea of the matching donations program was to let employees have a voice in their community and to support them. So this thread kind of goes through my original work life and my new work life, which is empower people to have a voice in their community, support them in doing that, guide them in the best way, and be open-minded to changing it if you have to.
Yeah. And really,
guys.
No, and really through mobilization too, Lisa, because, you've really done that a lot throughout your illustrious career. Now with the given state of the world, do you see that a lot of leaders are missing out on opportunities to actually make a statement through their platforms?
I think there's yes, I do think they're missing out. So I'll answer your question directly. I think it has to do with there's never just one agenda that you have to deal with as a leader.
Yeah.
There are multiple constituencies you have to deal with at all times. Very rarely is it one. So you just have to balance the impact on each of those communities as you make your decisions. And you can be more of a risk taker or less of a risk taker. And I can't hope to speak for everybody's choices that they make, but people need to understand it's not like, oh, you should go do this. Well, you don't know the 7 other things I should do at the same time or the 7 other impacts that's going to have. And that's part of being a leader. You just have to decide what you want to stand for, the impact it's going to have on other people, try to be transparent about it, and try to live up to what it is you've committed to. And that means taking some risks and, maybe pissing some people off, but also maybe empowering some people to do some other things.
So powerful, Lisa. Ambika, I want to talk to you, right? Because you and Armoire have taken a really huge stance on the Black Lives Matter movement. What happened after your company started to post your opinions on your platform about that? What was the response?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tim. And I'll back it up just a little bit there and say it's interesting to me and I'm very honored that you said that, because I struggled a lot with like what is the magnitude that we can do as a small company of mighty but limited in numbers and limited in resources folks. And so we did what we felt was authentic, and to take a page from Lisa, like what we could create with an empowered community of what we had. And so what that means to me is that we started at very kind of like ground zero inside. And so we started by trying to have a conversation just amongst employees. And I was startled and frankly a bit sad about how impactful that was to a lot of our employees, because they had never been in a place where even the conversation door was opened. And to me, that was like not even a step, right? That was like, okay, well, as we formulate a plan, like we've got to have a conversation. But even having the conversation started as a step. And so we've tried from the inside out to kind of like figure out what our collective opinion is. And it's interesting because I know that what we say here and what I do here will become sort of what Armoire's position is. And to make that more authentic, I really wanted it to be broader than what I thought. And so being able to include our employees and our teammates in what that opinion looks like has been really powerful for me, because we obviously come from completely different, and actually that may not be totally apparent. One of the beautiful things about Armoire, because of the fact that it's a tech-enabled retail business, we have a tremendous amount of diversity of every kind that you could imagine. And people come from every different walk of life. And so because of that, the richness of conversation inside our little world is incredible. And so that has really helped me personally feel more empowered to take steps and make a statement and make actions and take different changes, because of the fact that it's an empowered position. I think that comes from like the strength of the diversity of opinion that sits inside our little home.
I love that, Ambika. So I want to really show love to our amazing audience and listeners really quick. If you're tuning in right now, you're loving what Lisa and Ambika have been saying, please show love in the comments. If you have any questions for them, we are more than willing to engage and actually address them as they're talking live. So shout out to Aaron Houston, who's saying, hey, bro. He's tuning in from Austin, Texas. So we have an Austinite in the building with us today. So much love to Aaron for tuning in. And if you're also loving this live episode, please make sure to share with your networks on LinkedIn, Facebook, or even share it in the newsletter if you want. So Ambika, what I really love about what you just shared is the fact that, you've been really intentional from the ground up in how you built your organization. And also in how you guys are showing up during these times of protesting and, I think a transformation is happening. I often when I'm talking to people about what's going on in the world right now, I feel like it's more of a movement and transformation versus a revolution. I think a lot of different countries and people and leaders are just waking up that enough is enough. And if we want to move forward 2020 and beyond, we really have to create inclusive ecosystems as well as inclusive organizations. What kind of inspired you to be intentional from the start with the way you were building Armoire?
I think it was perhaps dual. It was very clear to me that this business was so complicated that the only way we were going to be successful was to have an incredible diversity of experiences. And so I think it was the business necessitated being able to find a community that thought differently. And what I mean by that is like we have best-in-class technologists, we have best-in-class retail folks, best-in-class operations folks, and they do not look the same as each other. And when I say look, I mean in all sorts of different ways, right? Like their stories, their backgrounds, and that richness has allowed us to be larger than what we would have been if we were all kind of sort of more similar. And I think for all small companies, it's David and Goliath for everybody, right? Like our competitors are hundreds of times bigger than us. And so the only way to get a start is to figure out a way to be bigger than what you are. And I think it truly is the diversity of who we are that makes us even have the ability to compete. So I would say the intentionality came from necessity.
That's powerful. Prem, I want to get your thoughts on this, man, because you've built Humanly in a similar fashion. Why do you think the business world needs to pay attention to the issues we're seeing around systemic racism right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone needs to pay attention to it. The business world is interesting, so you can kind of look at it at an individual level and then at a macro level. I mean, every company, whether you realize it or not, every company is in the business of doling out power, whether you're doling out power based on who you hire, based on who you promote, based on who you do business with. And I think when you're in that position, it's incumbent upon you to, of course, be inclusive, of course, have equity, of course, be anti-racist. But I think it also makes you better because of it. My brother, he's a public defense attorney, and I was talking to him this morning about it. And it's interesting in the legal system. So if you are in court and your jury is not representative of the community or is biased, they can get thrown out. If you are being interviewed for a job and the interview committee, the jury in this case, is not representative of the community, if it's biased, there's very little recourse. And I think companies, need to take it upon themselves to change that. There's a lot of, like, Pepsi's an example. I mean, they have some flaws as well. Every business does, but I like what they're doing. I think they put like $400 million into ensuring that the amount of Black managers is increased by 30%. That's a start.
Wow.
By investing in Black-owned businesses. So I think putting those, words into action can ensure that you are doling out power in a way that will make the world more equitable.
I love this point about doling out power, right? Because I think a lot of organizations in the past have failed to realize that you are a platform for change. One of my favorite business leaders is Mark Benioff, because he sees the power in his platform with Salesforce. And I think, what's really special about what you just said, Prem, in this time, and I would love to get Jesse and Lisa's thoughts on this, is that you have to realize the power that you have as a leader and also within the community and organization that you have. Jesse, you started JobMobz a few years ago in San Francisco, and you all have been giving back to startups and entrepreneurs in a great capacity. Talk to us a little bit more about, how you all realize the power you have as an organization.
Yeah, I think just to echo what Lisa and Ambika and Prem said, I think Prem brought up a really good point in doling out power. I think especially with us helping organizations grow and scale, there's a lot that can be done at the forefront of the hiring process to make sure that we're being diverse and inclusive, because hiring at a lot of companies, they're going to tell you for these different roles that they want these elite schools and these other places or that people have worked at, that basically everything kind of builds on one step after the other in terms of if you went to Stanford or Harvard or an elite school, you're really privileged in that sense. And obviously minorities in the community don't have the same opportunity. So how do we have a more diverse and inclusive hiring process from the forefront, regardless of your education and background? I think something that we've been stressing even before the Black Lives Movement in the last couple of years. How do we just make sure that we have an inclusive and diverse pipeline from the beginning so that we have more diverse companies at the end of the process?
Yeah. And also, to your point, Jesse, you're a parent, right? It's how are you engaging those in your workforce who may not just only be early millennials, but also be parents who are working from home in this current climate? How are you showing up for them and with their communities and with their needs, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, Tim. And yeah, I think the big thing is just making sure we're understanding this time. There's a lot going on, obviously, with protests and with COVID-19, and people are pretty much having a lot of side issues. So I think as a leader in any organization, just being understanding, making sure people have accommodations, flexible work hours, and just really being understanding and leading with empathy, I think is a huge, huge thing right now.
Mm-hmm. You know what, Jesse? I would love for and Lisa, I want to ask you this as well. But I'll let Jesse tackle this first. How are you showing empathy and compassion? Because that's one of the big things I'm super a proponent of on LinkedIn. I'm always telling people show up with compassion, do things for others, be service oriented. And I think we're not. I'm seeing a lot of people who are being more introverted now because of the times we're in, right? It's very hard to open up and go out of your way because everyone is saying, be reserved, stay in. What are you guys doing online? Because I think it's really powerful to let the people who are viewing know that they can do something in times like this.
Yeah, I love one of the big things. Obviously, I think everything starts with yourself within your organization or even externally on your social feed. But I think everyone that's listening or otherwise that's presenting today, I think you have a lot more power than you realize, and you can obviously influence a lot of people. So just, again, lead with empathy and show love to the community and whatnot. I think that's a huge, huge thing that's going on, that people can have a lot larger impact than they think that they might.
Lisa, what are your thoughts on this?
So I would just say, first start with the people who are closest to you and work your way out. Start with your families. Like, talk to your families. Is everybody doing okay?
Yeah.
And kind of that, to me, that's the core. If your foundation is strong, then you'll be good as you branch out from there. So I start with the families and make sure we have a regular cadence of seeing each other, talking to each other. Part of my family's here in Seattle, so I get to see them a little bit face to face. The rest of my family's more extended, so we have to do Zoom or FaceTime or whatever, Skype, whatever tool we decide to use. Then you go to the people you influence in your business world. So, we had a big call with the basketball team. What's on your mind? How are you feeling about this? And you're basically looking at 80% Black women saying, what the hell is going on in this world?
Yeah.
And you have to listen, because it's not me. I don't understand their truth. They understand their truth. I'm trying to appreciate it and see if I can influence in my world, but I have to hear them. So it's opening up that opportunity as a leader. And again, there's a CEO in between we owners and the players themselves. So it's really stretching to say, no, we're all in this together. And where I'm on the boards, it's the same kind of thing. Then go to that group and say, what do you need to do in your community? What are you feeling? What's going on? And try to just let people want to talk. They do. Give them the space to do that and feel that trust. And then sort of assess, what can I do about this? Is there something I can do? My personal pet peeve is that somebody makes 10 social posts and you never hear from them again. Yay, it's that time. Look at me. And then you really don't stick through the change you need to make long term. Like, that's what it's about. Like, what are you going to be in the long run? Not, can I put a post up? I'm not a super social media person myself, although I do post occasionally. But it's kind of like, no, I want to do something bigger, longer, with impact. Because that's what we need to do. Not a zillion social posts, and 6 months from now, we're all off on another issue.
Yeah.
So I'd say I've done less in the moment, but thought more about the future. How will we invest our company's monies to really make ongoing change? Also understanding something I learned at Microsoft. One investment isn't going to solve your problem. It's going to be again and again and again and again and again. And if you're not up for that journey, you really aren't going to fulfill what you need to fulfill.
That's such a powerful statement. And what's so powerful about that too is that, one, I love your compassion, Lisa, and your love for service. But it's true, right? Especially things and issues such as systemic racism. Those are infinite battles that we're always going to be addressing. Ambika, I would love to get your thoughts on this, right? What do you think are in your perspective, organizations can do to address these systemic issues, right? Because you were really principled in how you were building Armoire's organization, but we're seeing that now a lot of organizations are rethinking those traditional norms, and they're not rethinking, okay, how do we make the right investments whether it be in an inclusive workforce or in investing in diverse entrepreneurs, or more importantly, in actually working with people in low-income communities. So what are your recommendations for leaders in the business world right now?
Well, I really appreciate what Lisa said, because I think I fully agree with that there was, and anecdotally, I can almost see it waning already, where there was, all the companies came out and everyone made a one-time donation. And then, and in retail and fashion, it was particularly apparent to me because suddenly, which is great, we saw a lot more representation of faces of different colors and backgrounds. And if you scroll one level down, just even on the scroll bar, that has all disappeared from, the top level feed. And the hard part is that what the stuff that Lisa's talking about, like, changing the way your workforce looks, or making sure that you change your hiring practices, what Jesse was mentioning, that stuff does not happen in a week. And so if the company wants to jump on the bandwagon and make sure that they've made their immediate sort of statement and impact, the work is actually going to come much later. And so I think it's a tricky thing. So I'm actually wrestling with this real time. I wrote something that was, kind of in that process that I was discussing, with like input from our team and stuff. But I also don't want to be the one and done. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, what is my, what's my next step? Am I going to write something else? Does this become like something that we're constantly updating people on? And it's kind of, it's tricky, because we won't have big flashy metrics to report next month or in the month afterwards. So do I wait until I have a great metric to report on, or do I report the work? So I think it's really the stuff that's deep and hard that I think a lot of us, especially on this call, want to change. We're not going to have a great report card just around it. So that's tough.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Prem, who are some of the organizations that come to mind for you, aside from Humanly, right, that are doing a really great job of doing the work?
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I'll also kind of tack onto that before I answer is I completely kind of agree with what Lisa was saying as well about, I think continued action is the only way we'll move forward, but that also takes empowerment. It's not something that the board does or the leader, they need to set the tone. But, that program that Lisa was talking about at Microsoft, I remember how that empowered me, the employee matching program. And I think ways that we can look at it, empowering our employees, can help us move forward. So as far as like some companies, I think generally I'll just bucket it into those action-based things. So the example I gave with Pepsi, I think, is a good one, because they're actually putting systems in place and putting leadership in place that will then do the hard work ongoing. It's not just a simple one-time lip service. I actually, Microsoft is another good example. But I think generally, as I think about companies that are doing a great job here, it's ones that are creating systems, and anytime you create a new system, like Ambika said, it's not gonna, you're not gonna have metrics in a month, right? So it's really committing to the long-term work, and that I think fixing systemic problems takes building systemic positive change. So.
You have to create systemic ripple effects, right?
Yeah.
So, I think I want to share this question and dish it out to all of you, and kind of have us think a little bit about it too, because, I think this is like there's a movement brewing, not only across the world, but with a lot of young leaders. Lisa, I want to start with you. How do you recommend young leaders use their growing platforms and the opportunity and runway that they have to support social issues?
Well, I don't think that's a problem. Young people tend to have a voice very different than my generation, for sure, because they've grown up through social media. So having a voice is not a problem, I don't think. That's just my impression. Choosing the platform, and tools you use to get your voice out should be natural for you. Some young leaders who are business people use LinkedIn more. Some people who are broader use other tools. So at the end of the day, having a voice isn't the problem. What do you want to say and why? And are you representing yourself, or are you representing the people you're leading? And I think as you get up in leadership, it's a challenge to balance your own personal views with the views of the people that you represent. And typically I've seen leaders and their teams be closer rather than further apart. So I don't think we're talking about, one person who's at one end of the spectrum and the team that's at the other. But still, how do you balance your own point of view with the view of the people that you represent? And I think that's a discussion. And that transparency is really important. And that humility is really important. Oftentimes, young leaders feel like they need to know the answer. And they need to come out and lead their team and show their team that they're a leader by telling them they know the answer. And somebody, it might have been Prem or Jesse or somebody who talked about empathy, leading with empathy. Lead with your ears. Lead with your ears, because your customers, your team members, your partners will all tell you what's going on. And if you listen carefully, you can integrate that. I met Prem initially at Microsoft because he wrote a paper and sent it to me. I had not met him before he was in the organization. And he wrote a paper about reverse mentoring. And I remember it very distinctly. Now, it was so insightful for me because here was somebody who thought about a problem that I couldn't see from where I was. And he was very detailed and thoughtful about how this should happen. Didn't always agree with it. I thought it was, some young kid just coming in. It's like, oh, he'll learn eventually. But that's the kind of thing that I think from a leadership perspective is so valuable. I learned so much because he took the initiative to tell me. And my hope is that when people view you as open like that, as a leader, especially a young leader, that you will hear them, you will be able to do more of the right thing. And you don't always have to know the answer. In fact, honestly, you rarely know the answer. You just have to guide everybody to the right spot at the right time based on what you know.
Whoo, that's powerful, Lisa. That's powerful. Definitely note that down if you're listening. So I want to show love to Edith, who's saying, lead with your ears. Wise, wise, wise. Andrew Gardner, Mr. COO of Humanly, saying, I'd love to hear what the panelists feel we can do about the polarization we see on a daily basis. Jesse, thoughts?
Say that one more time, Tim. I missed the
question. Andrew's asking, he'd love to hear what the panelists feel we can do about the polarization we see on a daily basis.
Yeah, let's what specifically, what are we referencing in regards to polarization?
Well, I think just the toxicity between, the left and the right, and us not really being aligned just as a humanity, I believe. So how can your messages and actions break out the echo chamber we all experience? So people feeling really guarded in their beliefs.
Yeah, I think just going back to the Black Lives Matter movement in general, I don't think it's a right or left issue at all. I think it goes down to being systemically, Black people have been oppressed in regards to opportunity. And going back to the theme of this specific stream, I think it comes back down to hiring and what I said earlier in regards to making sure that we're inclusive in our hiring process from the beginning. I wrote an actual article on it, how to cultivate inclusivity in your workforce. You can check out the link on my profile, but Dr. Erin Thomas is mainly who I was referencing in that, and she's put out some really good work in regards to inclusivity in the workplace. So I think in regards to Andrew's question, I think just lead with your own thoughts, start with yourself. I think Lisa and everyone else has referenced that. Work on yourself regardless of political affiliation, and try to have an open mind, I think is the biggest thing.
I love it. Ambika, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's interesting because at least in my professional career, I can't ever remember a moment like what Jesse said, where an issue that there's certainly sides, but to me it's so clear, and thankfully to my organization as well, that there wasn't really room for an inclusive perspective here. Like we were just gonna because this to us is not exactly not a right or left issue. It's a systematic thing that we had to take a stand about. What is interesting is that our customer base didn't unanimously feel the same way, and so we have gotten quite a not a large amount, but we've taken some hits from a revenue perspective with people who don't agree with our perspective.
Wow.
So that it's an interesting thing. Like the word inclusivity to me means when first and foremost you bring everyone's safety and well-being to the forefront, and then you start to talk about ideas. And so for us, this wasn't. We are still being inclusive in our mind by only seeing one side of the Black Lives issue.
Yeah. I love that you shared that because, I saw this really fascinating Instagram post by Jeff Bezos. We all know who Jeff Bezos is. And he actually highlighted email he got from a customer actually upset about the fact that he had a Black Lives Matter, that the Amazon put a Black Lives Matter on the front page of their website. And, one of the powerful things that Jeff said actually on this, in this Instagram post was that, X name, whatever, you're the type of customer I rather lose, right? Like I'm happy to lose. And I think to your point, Ambika, it's really interesting that there are some people who don't get this movement, but I think that this is one of the very rare opportunities that we're actually seeing humanity band together and say, okay, enough is enough. I mean, we're seeing universities actually take down statues, specifically Princeton, of former leaders in history who actually were racist. So I think like there's this really interesting effect that's happening in the world where we're all waking up. So I love that point that you made, that even though customers may not be aligned, you still as a business have to, stand on the right side of history. Prem, I want to ask you, man, what are your thoughts on this? And also I want to go back to this earlier question that we posed to Lisa. How do you think young leaders can use their platform to create change?
Yeah, as far as the polarization thing, I'll kind of steal what Lisa said in terms of leading by listening. I think polarization occurs when two people are talking. It rarely occurs when two people are listening. That's so
powerful.
As far as young leaders, I agree with Lisa. I think there's a lot of it has to do with how you use your voice, when you use it, and then that sustained action afterwards, versus just building a voice. There are I think a lot of folks whose voices should be amplified more, and it's up to us as young leaders to make sure that our peers have that opportunity when it's not present. I think another thing is just working together. Like this is not a competitive thing, right? Like we can involve as many. Business just can become so competitive, where when it's an issue like this, where there really, in my eyes, is just one side. I mean, the more the merrier, right? So I think doing chats like this, I was looking at some nonprofit initiatives our company's doing, and we want more and more people involved, not this closed group. So I think involving as many people as you can, and then the empowerment thing. So if when Lisa was leading HR at Microsoft, if we didn't have that matching program, I wouldn't have been able to spend I probably did like 500 hours of time at the American Cancer Society, but that effort was multiplied because the platform of empowerment was created by leadership. So I think that's another way young leaders have the ability to empower too. It doesn't just have to come from the top.
Powerful. Man, that's so powerful. Jesse, what about you? What do you think we can do to really empower young leaders to use their platform and say and listen with their ears?
Yeah, I think the big thing for leaders is just, again, starting with themselves, trying to think with an open mind, and really, just going from there. Lead with an open mind, I think, is the biggest thing.
Big, powerful takeaway. You know what? And, what I love about, this fantastic group that we're talking to, and I want to show love really quickly to Pravina, who said, someone once told me that affinity groups are counterproductive to in creating an inclusive environment. While I see the argument on the value of affinity groups, I can also understand this view of affinity by proximity to similarities rather than differences. Would love to hear the panel's thoughts on this. Jesse, let's start with you. What do you think about this?
Hold on, I'm just reading this question really quick.
Yeah.
What do you know, Sam, what she's referencing by affinity groups? I'm not familiar with that
Yeah,
term.
so affinity groups would be like employee resource groups, things of that nature.
Got it. That makes sense. Thinking about the question, I think the big thing is I think that just generally having, I guess the biggest thing I think starting is having, if your company doesn't already have one, I think having diversity and inclusion leader that can set up the best practices and processes is a huge thing. A lot of companies surprisingly do not have D&I leaders or even a D&I division within their company. As you can see, if you just look at the data actually the last month, there's been a huge, like a 100 to 200% surge in D&I positions at companies.
Wow.
At least in the Bay Area, that is. It's gone up exponentially. So I think that although I don't know the data about affinity groups and being counterproductive off the top of my head, I think that the biggest thing is they probably are quite, I know for a fact that they're actually quite useful if they're set up correctly from a D&I leader or an HR leader that knows about diversity and inclusion.
Lisa, what are your thoughts on this?
I don't completely understand the affinity by proximity, but so I'll answer the other question. If there's clarity around that, someone can say it. I think affinity groups are very helpful. I think part of it has to do with the ability for a leader, particularly in a larger organization, to be able to go to one group and say, where are you on these issues? How are we doing? How do you feel about working here? And it really goes to the inclusion part. So you can go out and hire a bunch of people who are in one particular group or another particular group. But if you really want them to sustain in your workforce over time, they have to feel like they're a part of. Yeah. And I've always found that affinity groups have done a great job of helping the environment and helping kind of translate for people how different groups, different cultures, different perspectives all fit into the bigger organization. So to Jesse's point, it is helpful to have somebody kind of managing how that works in your organization so that we kind of have a common goal. But I have always found them to be, very, very helpful to me as a leader, and I think to the company, at making sure voices are heard appropriately and making sure people are included appropriately.
Yeah. Ambika, what do you think?
Yeah. So, and I've also, I see this in my overlapping circles, right? I'm a minority, I'm a woman, so I belong to a bunch of these different kinds of things, and I'm not one monolith or the other. Like I could have lots of different affinities, and sometimes it seems like the people who think that affinity groups are counterproductive to inclusion are the ones who are part of the majority. And I understand if you are part of the majority, you don't need an affinity group because your affinity group is the rest of the world. Yeah. And so sometimes I think it's just like walking maybe a mile or an inch in somebody else's shoes and realizing that, hey, for me to feel like one of many, sometimes I need to be in a group that looks different than the norm, because then only in that environment am I one of many. And so that inclusivity sometimes comes from the fact that you're not the one.
Yeah. Frm?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's kind of in the details where, if the categories of affinity groups are created by people that are not diverse, then all of a sudden you're bucketing opinions. And I mean, I think affinity bias is real, but I also don't think that affinity groups necessarily perpetuate affinity bias if they're constructed and created in the right ways.
Yeah. I'm really thankful that you all found the time to come live with me on today's episode. I want each of you to kind of give your final takeaway with our amazing community of humanly and guide customers and advisors. Prem, what would be your takeaway on how individuals today, right now, after they finish listening to this, can go do something instead of just talk about it?
Yeah, right after this, I'm going to take off my headphones and start listening more. So I really think the listening piece is important, because I think, as we were talking about, this isn't an easy thing to fix, and it's not something that you can just post about right away. It takes continued action. But for me to be able to do the right things and, sustain that continued action, I think that starts with listening, particularly in areas where I am more of an ally and an advocate, and I might not have that lived experience.
Yeah. Lisa, thoughts?
Yeah, I think individuals need to take their own inventory. Like, what do you have the capacity to do? Because we started this sort of whole call about, oh my God, we're in a pandemic and we're having, all kinds of things going on. So before we tell everybody, go run out and use the energy, you don't have to go do something, you're going to fail. So just don't. Like, step back, ask yourself what's important to you. Ask yourself how much capacity you have right now to do that. Don't say none, because you do have some. I know smart people do. But take it one step at a time, because going back to another theme, you want to sustain it over the long run. Do what you can do now in an area that means something to you. Listen carefully to the world around you. Make one step, because one step will lead to a second step, a fifth step, a 10th step, and then pretty soon you'll be on a path. And it's okay if you have to go backwards a little bit to go forwards again. Don't stop. Keep thinking about it. Keep reinventing yourself in this new world. It will be a new world when we're all finished with this. It will not be what it was before. It will not. The pandemic will change it. All the racial strife will change it. We will be different. The good news is, I think technology is going to help us all do better going forward, but you as humans still need to sort of reinvent yourself in this new world and have your voice out there.
I love that, Lisa. Ambika?
I would echo a lot of that. I'll say the listening piece and the taking small steps really sticks out to me. And again, like, I'm super honored that that Tim, you characterized how we have approached things at Armoire as, intentional and big steps, because what I feel like I did was a small, tiny, which is what I had the capacity to do. And so anyone who's sort of, if you feel like, oh, should I do anything at all because it's so small and insignificant, does it matter? It really does. And I'll just from my very first employee who wrote me a note to say, hey, just the fact that you brought this up and that you're sort of enshrining us talking about this means everything to me. Like, that's all you have to do to really maybe impact somebody's life. So if you're sitting on the sidelines, don't, because whatever you do could really change somebody's way that they're feeling about their own world.
Yeah. Wow. And Jesse?
Yeah, I think obviously this similar sentiment to everyone else, but listening is important, but basically taking tangible actions, which I think is just don't be afraid to speak up and broadcast your voice. And some good places to start for listening perspective, obviously yourself, Tim, in the Guide podcast, but beyond that, some good resources. Dr. Lisa Boston is fantastic. Cynthia Pong, Dr. Aaron Thomas, shout out to all of them. So.
Amazing. And definitely we'll make sure that those resources that Jesse's been sharing are linked in the comments below, and he can even add them later on after this live podcast. In addition, if you want to follow our amazing guest on today's live episode, we've tagged them in the post, and they're super accessible on LinkedIn, Twitter. I know Lisa isn't really active on Twitter, but she will probably reach out to you on LinkedIn if you send her a lovely message. Prem, Lisa, Jesse, Ambika, thank you so much for being on today's live episode. I think you all need to be on a future episode. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good? Awesome. I would love that. With that said, thank you all so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks all.
Bye, y'all. With that said, that was another episode, and a special episode sponsored by Humanly and Guide of the Unleashing the Future of Work, a live guide podcast. with that said, use your platform to create change, no matter who you are, no matter how old you are. I think a lot of the things that Lisa shared on being intentional and, more importantly, listening with an open heart is actually really, really powerful. And in times like this, that's exactly what leaders need to do. With that said, I want to give the last word to our amazing fan and guide community member, Mo La Melissa, who's working on being a product marketing manager. She says, don't be afraid to go forward, even if you have to take a few steps back. That is spot on. And lastly, I want to show love to Mrs. Squires, great panelists. Thank you so much, Dana, for tuning in. Please share with your networks. Tag Lisa, Ambika, Prem, and Jesse on LinkedIn if you loved what they shared. I'm sure they're definitely going to follow up with you. Don't be afraid to reach out to them. And then more importantly, be the change that you want to see and leverage your platform to enact the change you want to see in the world. With that said, peace, love, and abundance. And I will talk to you all soon. Peace, y'all.